Welcome, 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 everyone. This is Helen, Miss Higgi, Higginbotham again, coming at you on another Sunday with When Black Women Gather. We know what happens. Amazing things happen. And this Sunday, we have an amazing discussion with Dr. Khama Ennis. I sent you out a video. I hope you all watched it. It'll give you some foresight into why she's here with us, because she's definitely a kindred spirit. She belongs in this circle. And let me bring her on spotlight. Okay. All right. You're muted, Dr. Ennis.
Hello.
Hi. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have, we've all been patients in emergency rooms, or we all have relationships with doctors, and they're always different. And we think about it from a patient perspective. But today, I'm challenging us through Dr. Ennis to think about it from a doctor's perspective, a Black doctor specifically. It's interesting because a few months ago, I don't know if you all remember, I shared with you an experience that I had as a Black patient and in an emergency room. And it was quite interesting. So to hear Dr. Ennis tell us what her story is very interesting. So very briefly, Dr. Ennis is an emergency room physician. If you listen to the video, you know that she has a stellar academic background. She went to wait a minute, let me get it right. Brown for undergrad, testing the memory. She went to Brown for undergrad to NYU for med school, and then she got her master's in public health at Harvard, and she did her residency at somewhere in Boston.
Now, what was that? In the Brigham.
Okay, yeah. So she's no slouch here, right? And she's going to talk to us. And I'm sure you saw in the description that I sent you that she's working on a documentary about Lee Crumpler. I don't know about you all, but I had not heard of her. So I'm looking forward to her talking to us about that. She's doing a project, Faces in Medicine. I'm getting it right?
That's it. That's it.
And she's going to talk to us about all of that. So right now, I'm going to excuse myself from the screen. Welcome you, welcome you, welcome you. We're so happy that you're here with us, and we are all excited to hear what you have to share with us. So I'm going to bow out and turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be with you all today and for taking the time on a beautiful day, wherever you are. And also thank you to Paulette Henry for introducing me to Helen.
Yes, Paulette, my good friend, former professor, but now very good friend, Dr. Paulette Henry is the person who referred me to Dr. Ennis. And you're right, Paulette, she belongs here. So thank you both. And I'm gone.
Stop. All right, so the main thing, we can talk about anything and anything. I put together some slides to share with you about the project that I'm working on, but then the conversation can go in any direction. So I'm gonna screen share up here. Can you see it?
Yes, you can.
Okay, cool. All right, so the project that I'm going to share with you is something that I created in the context of a professional shift for myself. So the project is called Faces of Medicine, and it's an attempt to move towards health equity through representation and storytelling, as it says right there. And so what is it? It's a narrative health equity project, really focused on representation. And ultimately, what I'm planning to put out is a documentary that starts with the story of Lee Crumpler, who is a name that I had not heard really until a few years ago. And she was the first Black female to earn her MD in the US, to be given the space to earn her MD in the US, right? Not the first one who was qualified to, but the first one who actually did. And that happened in 1864. Her background is really very interesting. She grew up in the Philadelphia area, and with one of her aunts who was a nurse and a sort of a healer in the community, and became a nurse herself, and had worked with physicians who thought that she showed promise and were able to facilitate her getting into medical school at the New England Female College of Medicine, which is now the BU School of Medicine. That school put out, I think, 98 physicians over its 26 years before it merged with BU, or became BU. But it's a name that I history and we share what's important in medicine, in our culture, in the way that we progress as a culture. The fact that this story has been largely absent is just not okay. And there's more being written about her now in the last couple of years, but um, so my plan is to create a documentary that starts really with her story, and then to discuss the current state of Black women physicians in the U.S. because we are not very much seen in this country. Um, with a goal of any young Black or brown woman who is thinking of who has thought, well, maybe I could be a doctor, but doesn't have anybody in her reach in her first or second or third degree circle who is a physician or who's, a friend's parent that they can ask. I want her to be able to find herself in one of our stories so that she can know what's possible, so that she can know it's attainable to be, the first college graduate in the family and become a physician who's now in the C-suite. I want people to see that story. So I'm putting that out with the plan right now is for it to be a 5-part documentary, and then a book that tells the full stories of current physicians in the U.S. With the young adult publication as well, because if we're trying, the person that I'm trying to move is that young woman who doesn't think it's possible or who's been um, who has expressed her dreams but has been has had doubts thrown at her. And so who are these folks? My goal, again, if the goal is to show a young Black woman someplace herself, I want it to be as broad as possible. So there are Black female physicians across the country and a range of specialties. So I've got 28 physicians who I'm speaking with. I've spoken with 11 already, and have 17 to go. And I didn't want there to be too much space in a map of the U.S. I didn't want somebody to say like, "Yeah, but I'm in Wisconsin. There's nobody like that out. There's nobody in Wisconsin." Yes, there is, and I'm going to interview her. There's more than one, but you know what I mean. And so we've got people from. So far, I've interviewed folks in Massachusetts, in New York, Birmingham, Alabama, L.A. And with a plan to go to the Pacific Northwest, Colorado, Midwest, and really I don't want there to be too much space between two spots in the map. And the specialties as well, because I think the other thing that, I certainly didn't know, just, by way of background, there was nobody who was in medicine in my family. There were no physicians in my family. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that all these specialties existed, but, that there are, that a Black woman could be a surgical oncologist or a urogynecologist who has done specialty training in integrative medicine and acupuncture. These are things that we don't really talk about. It's not really out there, but these women exist, and I want them to be seen. So all these different fields and specialties have been represented or are being represented. And also just to put a pin on the administration side, because we've got one of the first interviews I did was a Black woman who is the CEO of a hospital, because we also don't necessarily hear that story that much, but she's here. She's actually my CEO, which is amazing. And so why am I doing this? I'm an emergency doc. This is not what I was trained to do. I was a medical anthropology major, and I studied public health. This is not what I was trained to do. But, and we can get into this at some point later if y'all want to, I was, things happen in life, and what you commit to doing for, 5 decades when you are 17 or 18 may not be the thing that you need to be doing when you're in your mid 40s. And so life changes over the years. And at some point it seemed to me that, perhaps clinical emergency medicine in its classic sense was not the right thing for me. But I put it off. I put off changing. I put off switching because I told myself that was the only thing I could do. And, there's a lot of personal identity that's built into that. And I was also the only Black female. I was the only Black person in my department for all but two of the years that I practiced there, the first 2 years. So this is, at this point, I'm 16 years post residency. And for most of that time, I've been the only Black physician. I've been one of only 2 Black hospital-based physicians in my system. And knowing what happens when we are not present, knowing the impact of diversity in a team in improving the outcomes for people of color and for everybody, I delayed that move. And then COVID hit, and so I stayed longer. And so, but at this point, it became clear that this isn't, the solution isn't me staying forever. And also the fact that, there's a disproportionate impact when underrepresented people leave, right? Um, but on the flip side of it, burnout is only exacerbated by being the only person in a space. So if there's a way for me to change that dynamic, change that demographic in our space, then I think I would rather put my energy into that right now. And so, yeah, great idea. How's it going to happen? So, I've been learning a lot in these months since the fall, late summer, fall, when this idea came about. And I created an LLC called Dr. Bird, which is the national bird of Jamaica, which is where I'm from. And so the Dr. Bird is the LLC that is housing the project, and I was able to obtain fiscal sponsorship through Fractured Atlas, which is a social justice focused arts organization based in New York. And what that has done is it's allowed me to launch a fundraising campaign and give anybody who donates the benefit of the tax deduction that they would get for any other nonprofit organization. And I was able to reach out to a friend who wrote a book with a similar structure to what I'm working on, and she was kind enough to connect me with her agent, or send my idea along to her agent, who was able to share it with their agency, Living Greenberg and Rostan. And one of the agents decided to take me on, which is fantastic. So the full proposal is now drafted and being revised, and hopefully we'll get that out and have a publisher who says, yes, I need to publish this book. With these books, both of them, the YA and the full version. And as things happen, this is why I feel like this is a thing that needs to happen, right? I was talking with a cousin early in the project who I knew had gone to film school but was working sort of as more of a commercial producer. And I was going to get some ideas from her about equipment and suggestions and just a little bit of guidance. And all through the conversation of talking about the project, I want to record these interviews. I want to get the backstory. I don't want to I don't want to know where they went to school. I can Google that. What I want to know is how they got through. I want to know who their allies were. I want to know what they did along the way to make sure that they could get to, the finish line, and what they're doing now with it. So I want to record these interviews. And so I spoke with her, and she kept on saying, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Yeah, we can do that. I'm like, and at some point I was like, what we are you talking about? She said, oh, I thought you knew. Two colleagues and I have formed our own production company. And so we're growing this company right now. And I said, all right, well, that looks like I got a production team. So 3 Black women based in Brooklyn who are the production leads. And it has been amazing to work with them. They set up local film crews to meet wherever we're able to figure it out, and they have a live feed actually, and so they're curating the interview and the shoot from Brooklyn or from wherever they are. And so how's it going to happen? I am fundraising, which is also well beyond my comfort zone. This is not what I have done for my entire life, as probably like many of you. I am not a person who has spent a lot of time asking for help. I have, felt like I have to go out and just handle my business and make it all happen on my own. But this project is clearly beyond what I can do on my own. In order to, get it all the way through to a complete product, it's going to cost close to $1 million, if not more. But at this point, I sent an email late December and started my fundraising campaign. And at this point, I've raised $106,000, which blows my mind as an individual, because I never thought that I would ask for something, and then, within 6 months' time, have this much raised. But that is what has enabled me to start the interview process. So right now we're working on more proof of concept video and hopefully episode 1 very soon. So individual donations have been, I think, about $60,000 of it. I've applied for and received a grant from Art Angels, from the Agnes Gunn Foundation, Beveridge Family Foundation, and Mass General Brigham has committed to donating $20,000, and the Colorado University Emergency Department has committed to donating $5,000. So when those last two come in, that'll be the 106. And the timeline, because we all need endpoints, that I'm looking at is probably within the next 24 months. So the filming, as I mentioned, has already started with 11 interviews of individual physicians. And then one of my favorite ones was an interview with a focus group of Black undergrads who are pre-health or pre-med to see where they are. Because at some point I was like, you know what, I'm asking these questions and I've put this thing together based on what I knew 26 years ago when I was looking at this. But so it's been a minute. Let me make sure that we're actually asking the right questions and see what has shifted. And it was both validating and disheartening because I'm like, these are all this. It's the same questions. It's the same. There were 5 of them there, and a couple of them had folks in their families, and a few didn't, and a few had negative talk aimed at them. And anyway, I can't wait to share this with you all when it's all said and done. So the filming has started, and will continue through the summer and fall, depending on funding and such. And I will continue my fundraising throughout the duration of the project. And then the long game goal is, because, it's great to inspire and say, like, here are the people, here's the thing, but how do you actually get from point A to point B? I think there's very little that's more disappointing than like just getting all psyched to do something and having no idea what to do next. So as the heavy lifting for this part of things subsides, then what I'm planning to do is create another company to launch a nonprofit that would have 3 legs, really. One is to be an avenue through which people could donate for the things that make it hard for Black women to get into medical school, right? Like the thousands of dollars that it costs to submit your applications, where you may not even get in. You may not even get an interview request, and you're spending a lot of money just to apply. And then you go for an interview, which may mean flying someplace and needing an interview suit and needing a hotel and all these things that cost a lot of money. And I mean, personally, I remember that I limited where I applied based on the fact that I would need to take a bus to get to wherever I was going. And I would need to have a friend that I could crash with wherever I was going for interviews. I applied to 1 or 2 places that did not meet those criteria, and everything else had to have a place that I could stay. I don't want anybody to be limited, and so that's one leg of it. Another leg will be a virtual mentorship network, because I think, as you all probably know, when there are very few people, we all mentor, we all put our time into helping the next generation up, but time is limited and finite. And so if there's a way to amplify the sharing that we can do and the mentorship that we can do with a virtual network, then that is what I'm working towards figuring out. And then, cataloging, because there's so many organizations and so many individuals that are working really hard to improve the situation for Black women and for everyone who's underrepresented in medicine. But I have yet to find a coherent database or resource that says, okay, that's searchable, that says, okay, I live in Omaha, what is there for me here that will help me get to my goals, reach my goals? And so I'd like to create that as well. And then ultimately, if there is a way for this to be a model for other underrepresented groups in medicine, because it's not just us, for Black men in medicine, for Latinx people in medicine. So hopefully, if this takes off as I'm working towards manifesting, this will be something that we can share with a broad audience, so that, one, young Black girls can see who they can be, who they can see themselves, who they already are, honestly, so that those of us who are in the space feel less alone. Because honestly, one of the things that happens is that when you are the only, and as you probably have experienced in some spaces as well, there's this false appearance of a monolith that is created by being the only person in that space, and the burden of representing for everybody from every possible background, which is utterly impossible. So lifting that burden for others, for Black women, Black female physicians, and then and for everybody, just to challenge their assumptions about the person who's coming into the room and what their job is and what it might be, and stop assuming that we are somebody other than we are. So that is the project that I am working on, and I thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and if there are any questions, I'm also, because I'm not going to lose an opportunity, I'm happy to share the fundraising link if this is if I'm allowed to do that. But this is my email and my phone number. It's my cell. If there is any desire to reach out, thank you. And I will stop sharing.
You can share your information. I put it in the chats for you to be sure and tell us for folks who, oh, Gloria, I'm sorry, I made you spotlight. I'm supposed to be doing me. Bye, Gloria. Yeah, I put in the chats for for you to share your information for people who want to make a donation.
Will do. I will put that in right now.
Okay, so that's really exciting. The whole thing with Rebecca Crumpler. So you didn't hear about her before med school, or you learned about her after the fact?
Well, after medical school, like honestly, within the last 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
Graduated from medical school, finished everything. And I was the president of my SNMA chapter in medical school.
Wow.
Right? Like we didn't know. And SNMA is the Student National Medical Association, which was formed by Black physicians in 1895 when the AMA wouldn't let us in.
Wow, that's interesting. You know, in the whole in your video that I share with everyone, which I hope. How many people has anybody watched? Tell me somebody who watched the video. Do you have any thoughts on it before I ask who watched it? Is anybody who can share their initial thoughts on the video and what you thought of it? Go ahead, Jackie Lynch. Jackie?
Yes, I was just unmuting. I was absolutely blown away by the video that you shared, and I shared it with quite a few people here at home. Well, I'm in Jamaica, and the feedback was so positive. I think, Dr. Ennis, the reason why so many people are not on the call is that we're in the middle of our championships, and you know, athletics in Jamaica is like water. So, everybody's tuned into our championship. So they sent a lot of apologies, but it was just amazing. And what I liked about the presentation, and I really give you a lot of commendation, is that it was a very, very important topic, but you presented it with humor, but got across the points nevertheless. It's a serious topic, but the presentation was very engaging and honest and very vulnerable, and I really commend you for that. It was really good.
Thank you.
And she spoke to us in a way that lay people can understand. So I see another question. Micey, is that right?
It's absolutely right. That was pretty much exactly what I was going to say. It was very real, very honest, very engaging, and the humor was great. I watched it twice just to make sure I didn't miss something. Excellent job.
Thank you. After I watched it, I sent her an immediate text message. I said, wow, I'm applauding over here. This is great. And I hope that some people who are on here who are attorneys will share your experience about showing up at court and people thinking you're the defendant, because surely you cannot be the attorney. Yeah, anybody else want to talk about the video before we move on? Or just any thoughts that you have about the presentation? Oh, okay, Ms. Rutherford, go ahead. You're muted, hon. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I definitely wanted to share my thoughts because you raised a good point with respect to even attorneys. With me being one, I could relate to the video in that respect because one of the things that we often have to deal with is implicit bias. And I really like the way that you formulated the idea of patients coming into um, the setting with you, and you do the same thing with everyone. It's just how are they perceiving it? And so it's a matter of, well, okay, this person who was white, you thought that was the doctor, but in actuality, they were not. And now you're having trouble processing the fact that I'm the doctor. And so, as Helen stated, I definitely could relate to that as well. There's been several times that, I've been in the courtroom and, been called the intern, possibly, mistaken not for being an attorney. And it's a lot of bias. There's age bias, there's gender bias, there's racial bias. And so all of those things are at play. But I think the way that you formulated the argument was amazing because it wasn't argumentative at all. It was just very like cohesive. So for me, I appreciated it. And I think that what you're doing is wonderful. I'm also I have Jamaican background. So shout out to you. You are just a representative of, I look at my family and where I come from, and I think it's amazing. So continue to do the great work that you are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. No, it is such a universal experience. It really is.
Sorry, cut you off. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying it's such a universal experience, like regardless of what the profession is, until it's just like we just need to normalize our presence in these spaces. Like this is not like I'm tired of being exceptional because like I'm good and all that, but I'm not like I am one of many, many people who could be doing that work, right?
We talked earlier, one of the things that I usually say in most of these conversations, which I didn't say today, is that, I guarantee everybody involved respect, but not necessarily comfort. As a matter of fact, I'm not even interested in your comfort level because I think we get caught up in being comfortable and not having what I think are necessary conversations. So when you said something similar to that in your video, I love how you put it. You said, so if you think it's uncomfortable to be slowly poisoned, think of how it must feel to get a sip of that poison every day. I'm like, wow. What kind of feedback have you gotten from your colleagues around your observations? Because I also shared with everybody an article that you did in the Washington Post. So what are your colleagues saying, Black and non-Black?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like I'll say that most of the comments have been most of the feedback has been positive, right? Like because I was kind of nervous, but the when I did the talk, um, I then sort of took the text from it and put it into written form, and I floated it by my CEO because I was like, I just need you to understand that because I did this in our local community. This is about I don't. So if somebody says your emergency doctor did this, like this is what I did, just so you know. Consider yourself warned. Like, um, but she was actually really positive, and she shared it with the board, and then she shared it with other folks beyond that. And so that was really reassuring. There's sort of a physician version of Facebook called Doximity that posted it on their like one of their like things to read. And so I like clicked on the Doximity and I saw my own face there. I was like, oh goodness, I didn't know that was going to happen. One of the little spotlight things. And then you know, the comment thread. And so Doximity is interesting because on Facebook, on Instagram, you can have an alias, you can have whatever. On Doximity, you are identified by your name, your profession, where you work, your license is confirmed. Like there is no anonymity on that site. So you're posting as yourself. And the vitriol that came out of some people, um, like I hadn't seen much of anything, and I got a text from a friend who was like, I'm so sorry about this comment thread. I have no idea what was going to happen. I
And they're
apologize.
speaking without anonymity, and they're
And
being,
they are
wow.
not anonymous. They are not anonymous. And so, um, you know, people saying, I mean, just some of it was just like, like grade school stupid nonsense. Like, if people are complaining, don't worry, people are going to stop asking how old you are soon enough. you know, do you want some wine with your cheese? People questioning my credentials, people posting comments that I didn't actually have a chance to read because they were taken down because they violated their own standards. So I don't even know what some of them said, but I know that some of them were vile enough to merit being taken down, and for me to get apologies from white men in other parts of the country that I've never met. Um, that were just apologizing for their colleagues that they've never met for some of the toxic stuff. But I will say we always focus on the negative. 95% of the feedback and responses I got were really positive, and people saying, "Thank you, you opened my eyes. Appreciate, you know, this feedback." And in my own department, it's gone pretty well as well. Like people, I mean, maybe part of that was because at the time I was the chief of the department, so who are they gonna tell? But like, but but you know, people were pretty good. Anyway, sorry, long answer.
Oh, it's a good answer. And it's amazing to me that people, it speaks a lot. You know, I say since, and I'll get political here. I've seen a doctor recently, and I was so appalled by his interaction, his condescending attitude toward me, that when I left, I wrote an article about the 74 million people who voted for Donald Trump, and we don't know who they are, and they're people that we trust. And there are doctors, there are lawyers, there are judges, there are police officers. We don't know who they are. And so to think that doctors would not have enough to be savvy enough, well, I guess we want people to show up for who they are, right? So I don't know.
I wanted to see that, and I actually wrote back. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sad that they were taken down because I want their chair to explain why they're still there. I want their chair to explain or investigate, like, what are their patient outcomes like? Is there a different, for emergency medicine at least, like, what are your numbers on admitting patients with chest pain by race? Can you break that down for me?
Exactly. Jackie Glass, I see your hand is up. You have a question for the good doctor.
I do. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Ennis. And I enjoyed all of the presentation and all that you are espousing. I just have a question. So the documentary is 5 parts. So I wanted to know those parts, how does that break down in terms of your focus? And also, who do you look to distributing it to? Will it be a Netflix, an Amazon? And I share that because I'm actually working on a documentary on Black women's health, and the focus is a little bit different. It's a little bit different. So I just have those questions for you.
So the 5 parts, the goal is to have the first part be really the backstory of Rebecca Lee Crumpler, because I feel like it feels like that needs to be out and normalized, and just our presence in medicine for, you know, since 1864 has to be normalized. And then the other parts are going to be more looking. So I've got a range of ages and spaces. And so actually one of the people that I interviewed was the first Black female doc that I ever remember meeting. She is an amazing woman named Thea James. She's in Boston. But I met her when I was in medical school. And so it's going to be sort of go through sort of the generations, looking at those who've been in practice for 30, 40 years, looking at those who've been in practice for 20 years, 10 years, and then towards future generations, breaking it down, and also helping people see, like, this is where the allies were. This is, you know, there was one woman who includes basically being sabotaged by her own residency program, right? Like, so showing these aspects of things, but in a way that leads to the end game of next generations. Here's what we need to do, on all of that embedded within an equity lens, because of the way that outcomes change when we are present. You know, infant mortality is reduced by 50% when there's a pediatrician who's Black. Babies aren't any different, right? Like, but Black infant mortality improves by 50%. That is real. There was a study, it was a study done in Florida that looked at that. And there are a couple of questions that went through the chat. Oh, the other question was distribution. My goal, I would love it to be on a Netflix or a Hulu or an Amazon. So when I have a sizzle reel cut, then I'm going to see if I can shop it around to those spaces.
Ask you, I know in your video you talked about people asking you, you don't look like the doctor, or, and I love your thing about melanin. I say melanin is as God's gift to the Black women, to Black women. And they would love to extract it from us, but they don't know how, thank God. But let me ask you another tip, do you find skepticism from Black patients as well?
Not usually. Not usually. Most of the time that I see a Black patient, it has been like, oh my God, you're my doctor. Or like, I have been coming to this hospital for however many years and I've never seen a Black doctor. How long have you been here? Because if you're the one, statistically speaking, like you're only going to work so many of the shifts. So, but for the vast majority of patients, and honestly, I remember, God, there was a patient who wasn't my patient, um, who was in the behavioral health unit. So she's a patient with a psychiatric illness and was dysregulated and was not processing and processing well, and she was scared. And she was lashing out, not really against other people, but more at herself in her room. And so the staff was trying to get her to calm down. And there's a response that we call code orange, when we just sort of bring all hands on deck and the patient may need to get medicated to just bring it down a notch. And so they called it code orange. And I got there, not my patient, but I get there, and there is this woman in the corner of this room. And she's a Black woman, and all I can see between me and her is just a sea of white faces telling her to calm down, yelling at her to stop, yelling at her, and I was just like, I'm like, you can't, like, everybody move, let me in, let her see my face, let me see her face. We don't need this. This is no longer her illness. This is pure fear, and it is entirely merited. If you could see it from her perspective, if you lived in her skin for her whole life, this is not how we can do this. And there's actually relatively new data about Black men, at least, being put 22% more likely to be put in restraints in emergency departments than anybody else. You know. So.
Black men being put in restraints, period. Wow, that's bad. I shared with you that I had that horrible experience at a local hospital. And I don't know if I told everybody on the call, probably not, I don't think we've had a call since then. I complained from the top to the bottom. I complained the whole time and would not give it up. And they actually invited me to come and speak to their grand round, which was their round of doctors. And there was administrators, it was a lot of new doctors. And I share with them, like, with no hesitation at all, what was my experience in their emergency room. And it was really, really, really bad, from service to cleanliness to the whole bit. If they had to be graded, they would have gotten, if there was a grade lower than an F, they would have earned it. And I let them know that. So when you talk about, all the white doctors, because one of the things they asked me, well, what can we do? I said, well, for a starter, you can have a staff that kind of reflects the population that you serve. I live in Camden, New Jersey, so the people here are Black and brown. And if there were 50 or 60 people in the room, and I don't know how many else were Zooming in, but they were not Black. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. And I also talked to them about owning the fact that Black people have reason to be distrustful of the medical profession. And they had to own that and stop making excuses, and how the opioid, for once, racism spared Black people and opioid addiction to the level that it affected white America. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's hard. Like, when, we are 2%. Black women are 2% of physicians. Black men are just over 2% of physicians. And these numbers haven't changed that much in the last couple of decades. So, and I remember when I was applying to medical schools, so the solution has to start like all the way back, right? When I was applying to medical schools, I was lucky enough to be granted several interviews. And so I went on the interview circuit, and it's the same group of kids going to the interviews. It's the same, and then you do the revisited weekends where they try to recruit the, the black folks that they want, the 3 black folks that they want, and it's the same people at each school at these revisited weekends. And so you're like, so how how are we going to change? If y'all are all trying to get the same half a dozen people, this doesn't actually diversify medicine, right? Like this is that gets these people in, and that's it. It is, we need to start from the ground up, from way back. And there was a question about NMA. So I've been actually, one of the docs that I interviewed is the started the New England chapter of the medical, or restarted the New England chapter of NMA a couple of years ago. So they have been, she has been supportive of it in that way. And I think as an organization, I've not spoken with the mothership yet, though. I reached out, but I need to tap back and see if I can get see if I can get an answer more timely. And thank you for the donation.
Association, isn't it? What is it?
National Medical Association.
Yeah, and so if so, how are they responding? I think it is excellent what you are doing. I'm so proud of you. So have you heard from anybody in the National Medical Association about the work that you're doing?
I have not had any conversations with anybody at the national office of it. With the New England branch, absolutely, but not the national office. So I need to poke again and see if I can get a response next time.
Okay.
It's all about the
Yeah, that was another. Oh yeah, okay. Lisa had asked that question too. Judy, go ahead. What's your question?
Doctor, is there any truth to the fact that there are a limited number of doctors that are allowed into the system each year?
So the federal funding for that helps to subsidize medical school, and so the answer is there are limited spots in medical school, and then there are limited spots in residency, and there may not be a spot in the residency specialty that a person wants to go into. So the way that residency spots are doled out is bizarre. You go through medical school, you apply for your residencies, and then there is this match day where you'd applied for residency programs, you have interviewed wherever you were invited, and then you make a list in order of preference for the programs that you like, and the programs make a list in order of preference for the candidates that they like, and then some computer mashes it all together and spits it out, and on one day in the spring you get an envelope that says where you're going to spend the next 3 to 7 years of your life. It's bizarre. And so if you want to be an orthopedic surgeon but you don't get into any of the residency programs that you applied for, then you have to scramble to get into something else, hopefully, and then maybe transfer in the next year or two afterwards. So in general, there are always folks who don't get a spot in residency, so they can end up finishing all that undergrad, and with whatever debt they came in, whatever med school debt they end up incurring, and then have nothing, not be given the opportunity to do a residency immediately. It doesn't happen to that many people, but it does happen. And then there's also data about Black residents. What's that?
No, between which time, from the time that you finish med school, that you must do a residency?
So most people start, it's usually July 1st is day one. So if you're going to a teaching hospital on July 1st, you will have a lot of new people in that space. And the scramble usually takes place pretty quickly to get them in. People can try for a year or two, but after a couple of years, you're not going to really be able to get into training unless you are very, very flexible about the field that you're training in.
Because I guess I was wondering whether or not that limitation impacts the race of the people who are actually getting it.
So it might. I don't have that data about whether there are more Black people, Black medical students who don't match, because it's the match. So whether more Black medical students don't match as compared with others, I don't have the data on that. I do know that statistically Black residents are less likely to finish than their white counterparts, that when there are difficulties and challenges, um, they are addressed very differently.
I think that we can safely assume that when there are limited slots, some of those slots already have names on them, whether it's through friendships, legacy, donations, all the stuff that happens in every other profession, and especially even in law. So, and even in getting into school, I mean, I would imagine even getting into med school, there's just so many slots, and some of them are already earmarked before we even get around. So somebody's asking me, is something wrong with my sound? Okay, is it me? Because I'm having okay. Are you all hearing me or no? Are you hearing me good, Dr. Ennis?
I hear you okay. It's a little bit distorted. Like, it takes a second for your volume to come all the way up. But when you, like, after the first syllable or two, it clears up.
I'm not sure what's happening there. Sorry about that, everybody. I'll find my earpiece in a minute. Maybe that'll be better. Michelle Burgess, go ahead. You have a question?
Hi, yeah, just a comment. So I worked at Duke University Medical School, the whole School of Medicine, the whole thing for at least 15 years. And for 6 of those years, I was in geriatrics. And my role was to enroll medical students in our geriatrics program. And what I noted was that 100 medical students, and they would do a rotation to our geriatrics program, and they would do, we do the whole thing. So I was noting the number of Black students that would come in. And I'd see maybe anywhere from 2 to maybe 6 out of that 100. So I'm getting back to your statistic that you just, shared. But then I started analyzing this a little bit. I don't have the hardcore data, but I noted that although these folks were Black, there was a distinction between, and I don't hope not to offend anyone, Blacks that were from Africa or non-United States, right?
Absolutely.
Or international is the proper word. International folks of color versus American Black students coming in. And the tendency I saw was that there were more international Black students coming in than those that were, bred here in the United States and coming through. And it was just interesting, just a side note, I have a friend who is married to a Nigerian. They have Nigerian last names, and but the sons were raised here in the United States. And so when he applied to the MBA program, again, looking at the number of students and the number of students coming into MBA programs here, they have African last names, right? Or they're not Jones and Smith and things like we're traditionally used to. But the kid, it was interesting because he was identified as a Black person coming in, but he had an African name, but he was definitely born and bred in the United States. My point is that, one, I'm concurring with you 100% about the number of Blacks that are allowed into the program, and then the distinction between which Blacks they're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that was my point.
Absolutely. No, that is 100% accurate. There is, yes. I mean, I wish I could. I wish I would love to be like, no, but it's absolutely true. The number of Black medical students and physicians of American descent versus immigrants or immigrant descent, myself included, right? I remember going to, actually, at NYU, their revisited weekend, and they're trying to get the 3 of us to come, and this one old school surgeon, he said there are 2 things that I was like, oh my God. One of them, he said, I don't care if you're Black or white or green or yellow. If you're a doctor, you're my friend. And I was like, so if I'm not a doctor, what am I? And then he, his conversation goes on, he's like, and he finds out that I'm Jamaican, and he's like, oh, we had these couple of Jamaican, like it changes the way that they view a Black person when they hear that you're, because it's its own form of othering, right? Like it makes it make sense for people when I get asked, during a clinical interaction, like, where are you from? Oh, Jamaican. Oh, okay, now I get it. What do you mean? Now you get it. What are you talking about? But and yes, I would definitely consider film festival like the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival. It is on the list of film festivals that we are looking at for sure. So yes.
I was glad you asked that question, Michelle. Can you guys hear me better now? Yes? Okay, I put on this
Yes.
earpiece. Okay. I was glad you asked that question because actually when I watched your video and you said the person asked, are you American? I wondered, is that a Black person who asked you? I mean, I can see white people ask you that too, but I can see Black people asking the same question.
Yeah.
Audrey, I saw your hand up. Did you have a question?
Actually, I had a follow-up question. I
Thank
noticed,
you, Michelle.
yes, I noticed in other professions that there are increasingly numbers of people that are not, I guess, Native Black Americans. An IT for they have the H-1B bill that gives preference to people outside of the United States to have jobs in STEM careers like IT. And I didn't know if that was the same, same type of preference was given to people in the medical profession as well. That's why I know I see increasing numbers of physicians in the hospitals and things. So I just wanted to share that.
That's a good question because you do see a lot of particularly Indian
Correct.
doctors. So is there some HB1 visa thing going on in medicine as well?
There are visas, and there's also actually one of the questions about the residency matching is about former medical graduates as well. So there are former medical graduates who try to match into U.S. based residency for American medical graduates. Then the question has to be asked, like, why are we accepting people who are not from here when we can't even place our own people? So, but yeah, no, it's part of the brain drain of other nations and part of our own inability to embrace the Black Americans and try to erase that history. It's really and I think honestly to divide Black folks. Super effective.
Thank you for acknowledging that. So yep, that's the ultimate goal. And we recognize it as an ultimate goal. So when do we stop allowing that to be the reality? Like, when do we start pushing back? I'm not sure.
The same reason that poor white folks, or at least say, at least we're not Black, and so we'll vote, against our interests.
Yeah, very much. Have you ever had a patient refuse your services because you were Black?
I am fortunate and I have not had that happen.
But you've heard of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have definitely heard of it, but I've not experienced that myself, and I don't know if how I walk into a room, like, just try me. but no, it's I know colleagues to whom it has happened, but not to me.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, quite believable. I love in your video when you talked about the person who allowed you to do a rectal exam and then they wanted to know what your credentials were. I'm like, oh, okay. Just let anybody come here and do that to you. And then I'll ask if you're like, come on. So yeah, that was
Is it that hard? Is it that hard to accept?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go
Dr.
ahead.
Ennis?
Yes.
Hello. Thank you for being present. And Ms. Higgi, thank you for this whole thing. I'm so happy to hear this. This is great. I have a question for you, Dr. Ennis. I might have missed it, so excuse me if you tapped on it. What hospital do you practice in, and what is the demographics? When I say demographics, race, so forth and so forth. So if you did say what hospital, I must have missed it. I'm sorry. Pardon me.
No, I didn't say it. I am at Cooley Dickinson Hospital, which is in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's about 2 hours west of Boston. and about half an hour north of Springfield. So the population is, I live in Amherst, which is a fairly diverse town for Massachusetts, um, both socioeconomically and racially and ethnically, and languages and immigrants and all of that. Um, Partially because of the college. The hospital population, though, is uh, because it bleeds between the Amherst area and the rural communities. It
Mhm.
definitely skews. It's there are more white patients than anything else, clearly,
Oh,
uh, for sure. Um, and I mean, I think our black population, I think we're like in the 6% or 7% range demographically in this area. So it's about representative, although it's actually not 100% representative, which is something I'm trying to work on over there. Like, why don't black people feel comfortable coming to our hospital? They walk in the door.
Yeah,
Ever.
we should be going to the white areas for care purposely. I posted a,
Helen,
yes,
this is Beverly. I'm sorry, can you hear me? This is Beverly.
go ahead, Beverly.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not up with my new computer, and the owner of the computer is older. But I have a first. Thank you, Dr. Ennis, for the presentation. And unfortunately, it's the medical part of the rest of this country. But anyway, I wanted to ask you if you are aware of another effort to try to get our youngsters into medicine, namely the IFCO Pastors for Peace program that screens applicants for medical school in Cuba. I don't know if you are aware of it. Some years ago, when Castro was here and talking with our Congressional Black Caucus, he offered scholarships. And since that time, Pastors for Peace, which is an organization in Harlem, the minister has since died, but his daughter has taken it over. And they are the people who screen applicants for medical school in Cuba. And at this point, they've had over 100 grads, 6 years of medical school, 7 if you know Spanish, you got to take Spanish first and then, proceed with the medical school. So we have in the States, it's over 100, I forget what the number is now, who have graduated, come back, done their residencies, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm only saying this to say that, it's another arm trying to get our youngsters educated and into the field, and of course, having, affecting our medical practice here in terms of the fact that we need it to be patient-centered and not insurance company-centered, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's just alarming to hear that at this point in time, there are only 2% of residents who are of color. It's horrid. It's horrid. And up to now, you still have all of the disparities for all the reason we know. So thank you for what you're doing. Are you aware of the program?
So I feel like I'm aware of the program, but the name didn't ring a bell. Because I actually, when I was in public health school, did a field visit to Cuba
Okay.
as part of that program, and so I understood the medical school there, and that people from the U.S. could go, but I don't know that specific organization. But it's amazing, and when you think
Yes.
about what Cuba does with the resources that they've got compared with the resources that we've got, and how we are not doing any better,
Absolutely.
right? Like,
Yes, I visited in, I think 2016, we went, and of course we went to the school. They have several medical schools, but the one specifically for the foreign students is referred to as ELAM, E-L-A-M. But anyway, they have a big chart in the entrance that showed the graduates from 2005 was the first graduating class. At that time, they had grads through 2015. And at that point, they had well, first of all, on the left, you have, North America, Central America, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, Oceania, all the different areas. And then across the top, the years, and then the numbers of grads from each of those areas over the years. So this was, they had grads reflected at that point through 2015. There were 26,000 plus foreign graduates that they had graduated free. Yeah, okay, they brought them in 6 years or 7 years of school, and they go, and the messages go back to your home countries and take care of people who do not have medical care.
That's right.
So, the great US of A is so wonderful, but this is what Cuba is doing while we've had our feet on their necks for 60 years. But, that's another story. And at this point, I think it's over 30,000 foreign students that they have graduated. So we have a few who come back here, and I know some are in the New York area. I don't remember the others. But IFCO they're the screening organization for American applicants. So, but we have a lot to do, boy. We have a lot to do.
Cuba's doing great work. And I remember when I was in law school, there was rumor that they had a program for lawyers as well. I was all over it, only to find out it was not true. They were looking for doctors, not lawyers. So yeah. Miss Diane, you have a question for Dr. Ennis.
Yes.
She's in Spain, Dr. Ennis, just so you know. And I'm sure Dr. Ennis would love if you find an organization that wants her to travel to Spain to do a presentation. She'd be happy to come. Am I right, Dr. Ennis?
My passport is always current. I'm never without one.
Good for you. If I find something, I promise to let you know. I haven't, I guess, I don't know if it's the same topic. You touched on it when you talked about the woman who was having a mental health episode with a sea of white around her. And I've had a friend to have 2 very serious instances where she's had white doctors to treat her child. And they thought at the age of 6 that she had an illness and were going to remove her uterus. And what she actually had was an illness that comes only from people of Greek and Lebanese background. But because her mother's fair skin and her father's very dark and she's dark, they automatically assumed something else, and her mother refused to allow them to do it. And she had a rare disease that only comes to people who are from Mediterranean background. But seeing her face, they didn't think that. And so my question is, because the medical industry is always focused on the white male, they need to change the way they're doing it. And having more people of color will help that. But are they looking even in that direction?
So there is, in clinical studies, there is a push to diversify clinical studies, though that, there's a massive hurdle of trust to overcome, right? Like, we're not trying to be experimented on. That is the legacy that people, who are doing the research need to overcome to fix that. Right. There's a medical student, I think he was a medical student, a couple of years ago, while he was in school, was like, why are all my dermatology images on white skin? That is not what, like, I was editing a book chapter a couple weeks ago, and it said, rashes will be red. It's like, rashes are only red on pale skin. I need a different word for that. It's not going to be. So like, we just the ways in which we need to change the way, like, what the default is for everything. So there is a push to do that, but it takes so much time to actually create that awareness. And I think there are also a lot of places that are just still resistant. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there are people who it's the 70-kilogram male. That's what we learned on, was the 70-kilogram male. And there are all these chapters of medical history that have been erased. Like, the technology to preserve blood was a man named Charles Drew, who was a Black man. He's the one who created the infrastructure that the Red Cross uses, right? Like, all these things, the foundations for, the smallpox vaccine or vaccination for smallpox was an enslaved man named Onesimus in Boston, whose enslaver stole his lesson. Like, right, these are the things that we don't talk about, and the ways that we don't include our own history to all of our suffering. But I cannot imagine what they must have felt like, having to defend their child's reproductive capacity, especially in the context of you know, forced sterilization of Black women in this country. Like the history of that in this country is not insignificant, and it's not that distant. Um, the newer manifestations of it in the last couple of decades with the in incarcerated populations, but it's unbelievable.
Well, we're not just one color, and people want to see America as being white, and it's not. It's multiracial, it's multicultural, but you also have to take that into consideration when you look at illnesses, and I don't see that happening in America.
Yeah, it's going to take. I mean, because there's so much to rewrite. There's so much to rewrite, and there's a turnover that is needed in those who are teaching, right? Because if I looked through, because I was trying to just fact check myself, and I was like, I'm pretty sure the first Black female physician I remember meeting was my last year of med school. It was the very beginning of my fourth year, end of my third year, and it was in Boston when I was doing a rotation in emergency medicine.
Well, I don't even think are there a lot of Black or people of color teaching in the?
No, I went through my yearbook. I didn't see one. They had photos of the professors. I didn't see one.
My mother graduated from Mercy Douglas, which is in Philadelphia, which was a Black school for nursing and for doctors, and it's gone. Yeah. And that's what happens. They just get assimilated and then it disappears. So you lose it, and there's no way to really get it back. But that's the thing that has to happen. So keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
I will.
Yeah. I think that's a problem all around. I mean, I went to Howard, and if you look at our professional schools, they're full of non-Black students. I went to the dental clinic one day, and the professor, who was a Black man, thankfully, he clearly read my mind, and he waited on me, not the students. But I was just devastated to see so few Black dental students, and I'm sure Howard is not an anomaly. It's unfortunate. That's what's happening. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Diane. Anybody else have any other questions before we let the good doctor go? She's been so wonderful to spend this time with us.
Yes, I have a question, Dr. Ennis. You were mentioning about Charles Drew and Dr. Hale. I wanted to ask you, did medicine start in Egypt, in Africa, in Hotep? Where in this world did medicine itself start? That's a question. I don't know. Is it in Hotep?
So I don't know that honestly that's an answerable question, because I think it depends on how you conceive of. I was a medical anthropology major, so my whole approach to medicine is, embedded within different cultures and how different people view health, wellness, illness, and everything in between. And so I think that if you're looking at a type of medicine, you could say that. If you're looking at Chinese medicine, because I've also studied acupuncture, like it's really impossible to say without sort of defining a specific type of medicine. And because I think that also robs people of, I think that's part of why, Western medicine has become the dominant approach. It's what I studied, it's what I practiced, but it's not the only thing out there. That's a whole different
conversation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because I'm sure there's a lot that can be said for medicine in Asia. So that makes sense. Any other questions before we let Dr. Ennis go? Paulette, are you still with us? I don't know if she's still here or not. Paulette?
With you.
Hello, my love. Did you have a question for Dr. Ennis?
Well, not so much a question.
Can't hear. Paulette, you have to speak up. I think your speaker's not clear.
Oh, all right. Let me.
Okay, that was better.
Turn up my volume.
Okay.
I have less of a question and more want to on her work, and really.
It was better. Now it's not better. What's happening?
Oh dear. I don't know if it is my computer. Can you hear me now? No better?
Not really. No, you're breaking up. Is it just me, or is she breaking up for you too?
I can't hear.
She's breaking up.
Hold on. I think it could be myself. Hold on.
Okay. while she's getting it together. Hey, Miss Michelle Clark, you got a question for your Jamaican sister woman?
No, thank you, Dr. Ennis. I appreciate it. I didn't get to see the video you posted, Helen, but I did read the Washington Post article. Yeah, it's as you know, it's very similar to the law. It's a lot of the similarities are the same. The whole, oh, you don't look like you don't look like from here, whatever. I know in at least when the JAG Corps used to require that attorneys keep their degrees on the wall, in part for that reason. I don't know if it's the same with medicine, that the reason why you have all your degrees up is so that can kind of moot that question right out the bat. Because a lot of people are like, oh, did they teach you to be a lawyer in the Army? Like, no, I actually went to law school and I have to pass the bar just like everybody else. That's why those degrees are there. But so that's one side of thing. But the frequency with which you get asked, like not only the age, because as someone else said, it's several different biases going on, but as the person who had asked earlier, when you mentioned that, oh, I'm an immigrant, of immigrant descent, and then you get the kind of whole, oh, that's why. But we as educated, mature people should know that, don't buy into it. It's just their way of pitting us against each other. But it's in all of the practice areas. But we're grateful to have Black doctors like you. I know, like when I was specifically asked, it's comforting to have an OBGYN, Black female, particularly. I think that's the time when I appreciated the most, like, what? Not a white man? This is wonderful. This is wonderful. Because just certain things, like I remember, like my doctor, Dr. Shashira Leslie, she actually has dreads too. So she has locks. So it was like, when you had that question about, well, can I perm my hair? I mean, I'm natural now, but I had a perm then. So, it was like, it wasn't an uncomfortable conversation to have as far as, do I need to stop perming my hair? I can, a Black doctor's good. She's gotten that question before. They're going to understand how to answer that question. Just little things like that, but appreciate it. And keep on bringing those biases to the forefront. My sister's a dentist and she will get asked that. She's like, it's not uncommon for people to ask, is the dentist Black? Nah, sometimes she'll play people out. I don't know if she still does it, but initially in her practice, she would like, no. Well, I don't know, you need to come in, because her name is Ingrid. So you can't really tell Ingrid. You can't really tell what a Hyacinth is, which is what my real first name is. You see how those typical Jamaican names? And then the person show up and they're like, oh, you're Black. I mean, what were you expecting? Like Boo Boo the Fool? Yeah, I'm Black. I know my craft, I can help you and whatever. But we still have a long ways to go, and it's evident by the Supreme Court's decisions. We have, I don't know if we took 50 steps back, but we have many, 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 many more steps to go to get to that place where you walk in a room and you don't get the, who sent you? Are you the paralegal? Are you bringing the pizza? Like, no, I'm actually the lawyer. So.
You're the phone girl.
And you're paying for this minute, right? Like you just paid this for that.
It's just always, I mean, there was another lawyer on here who spoke and she mentioned the same thing, same thing. And she's much younger than a lot of us also on here, but it doesn't matter the age. It's just that it can't be you. Like, did Amtrak hire you? Yeah, they hired me. Go figure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's all.
I tell you, I always ask for Black doctors. So I was living in DC, and for whatever reason, I had changed medical plans, and so I didn't know who to go to. So when they offered me Letitia, I don't remember her last name, but I just assumed that Letitia was a sister. I had to laugh at myself because when I got to her office, in walks this very tall, good-sized white woman, and her name is Letitia. So I'm like, there we go for stereotypes, right? And my last name's Higginbotham, so of course people think I'm white too until you walk into the room. But that was so funny to me. But I see somebody here said Jennifer is saying all of her medical doctors are Black. I think that's more of a trend whenever we can to ask for Black doctors.
And it probably depends on the area that you're in, I would assume. Like here in the DMV, it's very possible to do that. I mean, with so many Howard grads, John Hopkins grad, but it's definitely not like that in a lot of places. And a lot of times you don't realize that you can get that second opinion from a Black doctor, because too much of that bias as far as thinking like, oh, pain is in your head. You know, the last time a white doctor, 2 of them insisted pain was in my head. My Black doctor who was like, go get a second opinion. I got diagnosed with like a whole bone cyst. Right. So I don't know. Do you see that getting any better, Dr. Ennis, as far as this perception? I think particularly with Black women, that we are just complaining, malignant, whatever the word might be. And that like, no, we're saying there's something with my blood pressure, I don't feel well. Like, please look at me because I could be having severe preeclampsia or whatever the case may be.
I think there is, the tide is changing. So I found out, this is a funny story, I found out backwards, but I gave a talk about 1.5 years ago about anti-racism in medicine, and just sort of called out a lot of different, aspects of it, and from the individual level to the system level to the government level, and what can be done at any stage of the game to impact it. And so I did that. It was archived. It was 1.5 years ago. No big deal. And then, but Massachusetts has now implemented a requirement that any physician getting their medical license, either for the first time or getting it renewed, which is every 2 years in Massachusetts, has to, as part of the 50 hours that are required, do 2 hours of implicit bias training. And they took that, and the talk I gave, I didn't spare anybody's feelings in it. So like, okay, if you chose that, then maybe you want to do this. It's one of 3 talks that fulfills that requirement. So at this point, and people can do some will watch all the way through, some will push play and go for a walk, but at the very least, there's an attempt to expose people to what is happening. Mass General Brigham has a whole United Against Racism campaign that is like removing racialized medicine, removing unnecessary clinical algorithms that result in worse care for Black people that are based on crap, right? So that's happening sort of one by one, and I think it's spreading, but it's just taken a long time. And one of the algorithms is one that affects people in pregnancy, which is.
I was just going to ask if you had any thoughts given the decision.
To force people to have pregnancies when we are already dying, especially, so having, I shouldn't say having had a postpartum hemorrhage and nearly dying with my second delivery. This is real and personal, as I'm sure it is. I'm sure I'm not the only one on this call. But, knowing that Black women die at, 3 times the rate of anybody else in the context of childbirth, and knowing that that's actually a national number, that when you break it down to the states where people are going to be forced to carry pregnancies, it is actually infinitely worse. Like, right? Like that, like when you look at the data in some of those spaces, it's 5 and 6 times. I am terrified. Scary. Both for infant mortality and maternal mortality. Having created no infrastructure to actually deliver better care for people, forcing people to carry pregnancies without providing any resources, I find terrifying. And I feel like it's a setup for, we all know that it's going to be well-resourced people who can just fly to wherever and get their reproductive health care. It's a situation that's going to force people into choosing sterilization and doing just bringing back a century-old nonsense of forced sterilization in Black women and poor people.
Exactly. Yeah,
right? It's your only choice.
Yeah, it's scary in many respects. Paulette, can we hear you now? Paulette?
I'm trying again.
Okay.
Can you hear me better?
We hear you better.
Okay, thank you guys. I just said I just wanted to say Khama for
You're good when you start, so stay right where you are when you start.
In my head, the speaker.
Maybe she can call in.
She's in Jamaica.
So my computer is all beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Paulette. No, I don't know why, but we're not getting you this week, which is very strange.
Which until we serve
Yeah.
in our project.
Are you in the country or are you in the city?
I'm in the city.
Oh.
So things should be better. I've had
We can't hear you, love. We really can't. All right. So Paulette, as I said earlier, Paulette was my professor when I was at Howard, and now she's my wonderful, wonderful friend. And she didn't give me an A because we were friends. I really earned it. But she's in Jamaica, and she is the one who introduced me to Dr. Ennis, and I'm so grateful because you've been such a wealth of information this afternoon, and I particularly have enjoyed speaking with you.
All right.
Let me see. I have a question here. I don't know if they sent it to me privately. It says this has been a wonderful session.
You're not muted, Paulette.
Okay. This person is saying this has been a wonderful session, and I have shared the fundraising information and links with others in the medical practices in Chattanooga who are all African American and who graduated from the Harry and Howard Medical School. So thank you for doing that for us. She's still trying. I love her. That's
Helen,
yes, darling.
I have her on my phone. I don't know if you can hear her.
We hear you.
All right, so let me try. Can you hear me now, Helen?
We hear you. Go ahead, Paulette.
All right, okay. I said I wasn't going to ask her more questions. Instead, I wanted to thank her for sharing and to congratulate her for the work she's doing. I wish her continued success and encourage you guys as much as possible to give her some support.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Thank
yeah.
you.
I see a few people have already noted that they made donations. So Dr. Ennis, be sure and drop that in the chats for us again before you sign off. I mean, you're welcome to stay around and do the after chat with us. But make sure you drop in the chats where people can make donations for you, how they can get in touch with you. And Dr. Ennis is definitely available to, I mean, she's here for us, but you know, she needs some paid speaking gigs. So if anyone's out there, if someone's out there who a few people have noted that, you know, they want her to come talk. So just, she's giving you her information. So please, please, please follow up with her. I'm sure she's very interested. So
thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, and for the work that you're doing. I love that you're forthright and you're, you know, and if those of you who have not watched the video, even though you've heard her speak, I encourage you to watch her video because she has a second career as a kind of comedian. I mean, she brings it up, but I think it's I won't say sarcastic. It's humor with a purpose. Like she made you hear. However it takes for people to hear you, it's all good. And she kind of like, even though it's not really humorous, it's really like how ridiculous you can be, but it feels like humor to people who want to receive it as such. So I love it. I'm shy of calling it sarcasm, but
a little dry.
Hey, it works. And your delivery was great too. So also I'll drop into the chats because her video is part of a larger conversation. So I happened to watch the whole thing. And where was that at? That was in Boston as well?
That was in Amherst. There's an organization called Embrace Race, started by a couple of friends of mine, Andrew Grant Thomas, who is also Jamaican descent, and Melissa Giroux. And they created this organization to help parents raise children of color with an awareness of what parents in general raise kids who understand race, racism, and how to navigate that in the U.S. And so they hosted this event as part of what they were trying to. It was right before COVID, as sort of one arm that they were trying to get launched.
Okay. Yeah,
But
so I'll drop that in the chats and you all make sure to take a moment to look at it. But anyway, Dr. Ennis, like I said, you're more than welcome to hang around and talk with us some more. I'm going to stop the recording, but not before I thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, and hoping that you will join us again, even if we just have great conversations, and you're a Black woman and you're always welcome. And I'll put you on my email list, and if you can drop in, drop in.
Please do.
Yes.
I will. This has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. So I'm going to stop the recording right now, and then we will resume talking. Let's see.